On June 18, 2013, with 28.2 seconds left in the fourth quarter of Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Manu Ginobili approached the free throw line, hoping to increase the 4-point Spurs lead to a 6-point lead, putting the game virtually out of reach. Ginobili, a career 82.7% free throw shooter, missed the first free throw and made the second, to move the Spurs lead to 5 points. After a quick timeout, the Heat drew up a play to try and get an open look from 3, and here's what happened.
If you're going to give help, you give help off of Wade. You don't come off another three-point shooter. James catches, fires a three, way off. Rebound kicked, still loose, picked up by Miller. Back out to James, another three. It's good. James knocks it down.
After the LeBron three-pointer and a Spurs timeout and just 19.4 seconds left on the game clock, the Heat quickly fouled second-year player Kawhi Leonard, who shot 82.5% from the free throw line that year. Kawhi approached the free throw line hoping to increase the 2-point lead to 4 points, putting this game seemingly out of reach.
82% from the line.
Kawhi missed the first free throw and made the second, to move the Spurs lead to just 3 points. And I'm sure you know the rest.
Just attack the basket. James catches, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining. Spurs do not have a timeout.
The Spurs were seconds away from capturing the title, but 2 missed free throws, 2 Miami offensive rebounds, and 2 three-pointers led to the Heat stealing Game 6 and eventually the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Just 1 year later, the two teams would meet again in the finals. The Heat were making their 4th consecutive finals appearance and were chasing a three-peat. For the Spurs, they were out for revenge. But let's go back. From their first championship in 1999, the San Antonio Spurs were a force to be reckoned with. Year after year, they were ring contenders, capturing 3 more through the early 2000s. But the 2014 Spurs were far removed from their last championship. In fact, it was 7 years prior when they were crowned the 2007 NBA champions, as they swept a 23-year-old LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. While that Spurs team in 2014 were far from the championship years of the 2000s, there were some familiar faces that remained. Well, 4 in particular: Tim Duncan, who turned 38 that season, Manu Ginobili, who was nearly 37, Tony Parker, who was witnessing the final years of his prime, and of course, all-time great coach Greg Popovich. Entering the 2013-14 season, the Spurs would be moving towards their final championship opportunity for at least another decade. Following the 2013 season and that heartbreaking finals loss, some questioned how much Manu Ginobili had left in the tank. Tim Duncan had just finished a great season at 37 years old and made the All-NBA first team, an honor Duncan hadn't received since 2007. For Ginobili, 2013 marked a major drop statistically, shooting a 10% lower field goal percentage than the year prior. But the Spurs clearly still believed in their veteran sixth man. That summer, Ginobili chose not to play for his home country Argentina in the FIBA tournament, something he had done throughout his career. But he explained that he wanted to get better and felt that his effectiveness was limited by his health in the 2013 finals. He signed that summer for 2 years at $7.25 million a year, taking just about half of his previous salary. The Spurs signed Marco Bellinelli in the summer of 2013 to a 2-year deal. Bellinelli would go on to provide key minutes, averaging over 25 minutes per game with 11.4 points per game. But other than signing Marco Bellinelli, the Spurs roster going into the 2013-14 season looked very similar to the year prior. With a familiar roster, Greg Popovich brought his team to the Air Force Academy, where they held training camp in Colorado Springs at over 7,000 feet of elevation. Coach Popovich hoped to instill military themes of discipline in an isolated setting that offseason. While the roster changes were minimal, the Spurs looked different in other ways. As a unit, the Spurs defined team basketball. They would go on to lead the league in team assists, with 25.2 per game. No one on the Spurs roster averaged more than 29 minutes per game. Their leading scorer, Tony Parker, only scored 16.7 points per game, while 9 of their players averaged at least 8 points per game. Players understood and executed their roles on the team, and it showed. The Spurs spent the regular season dominating teams, leading the league in margin of victory at 7.72 points, and ended the season with 62 wins and the best record in the entire NBA. As a part of understanding their roles, Kawhi Leonard, who was playing in his 3rd season, was developing into the defensive game changer that he would be known as for years to come. That season, he ranked 6th in defensive rating and 4th in defensive box plus minus. He recorded 1.7 steals per game and made the all-defensive second team. Kawhi would be huge for the Spurs come playoff time. The Spurs faced arguably their toughest challenge in the first round, against the 8th-seeded Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks were now a few years removed from that championship back in 2011, and after a mediocre season, arrived in San Antonio with ill intentions. Monte Ellis, Dirk Nowitzki, and Vince Carter led the Mavericks to a 3-2 lead going into Game 6, but the Spurs would take the next 2 games by 4 points and by 6 points, just sneaking out of the first round. In the second round, the Spurs would see the Portland Trail Blazers, led by LaMarcus Aldridge and a sophomore Damian Lillard. Ultimately, the Spurs would move on easily after 5 games. The Western Conference Finals featured the number 1 seed San Antonio Spurs and the number 2 seed Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder were coming off an amazing season of their own, where they captured 59 wins, including 3 regular season wins against the Spurs. Kevin Durant was 25 years old and had just won his first MVP in convincing fashion, averaging 32 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 5.5 assists. Russell Westbrook completed the dynamic duo, and they were supported by pieces like Serge Ibaka and Reggie Jackson. The Spurs won the first 2 games at home, followed by the Thunder's 2 wins in Oklahoma City. But in Game 5 and 6, the Spurs would seal their finals fate, taking both games. About a year after Ray Allen's historical shot, the Spurs were back in the NBA Finals, and Game 1 was full of drama. To set the stage, the air conditioning in the AT&T Center was malfunctioning, leaving the court temperature at around 90 degrees for much of the game. The effect of the malfunction was evident, but more than fans feeling the effect, the temperature was clearly getting to the players. The game featured 13 lead changes, but in the fourth quarter, things would take a turn. The quarter started with the Heat up by 4 points, but the Spurs would begin the first 8 minutes outscoring the Heat 20-10, including 3 Danny Green 3-pointers. At that point, the heat of the arena became too much for LeBron. After scoring a layup and cutting the deficit to just 2 points, LeBron requested to be taken out of the game due to severe cramping, his teammates coming to carry him off the court. And the Spurs took full advantage of the LeBron-less Heat. They shot 14 for 16 in the fourth quarter and outscored Miami 36-17.
The San Antonio Spurs take Game 1 of the 2014 NBA Finals.
By Game 2, the temperature control issue was resolved and Miami came to play. Game 2 featured 17 lead changes and was competitive from start to finish. But this time, the Heat would come out on top to even the series after a 2-point victory.
And that's the ball game! The Miami Heat even the series!
But that win would represent the last victory of the Miami Heat season. San Antonio outscored Miami 322-265 in the next 3 games. The San Antonio Spurs were again NBA champions. The Spurs were on a mission in 2014, a mission to return to the NBA Finals and this time take the trophy home. That specific 2014 Spurs team style of play was simply beautiful. Movement, passing, cutting, a constant motion of teamwork that consistently led to an open shot. Their offensive cohesiveness, coupled with their unyielding team defense, was the realization of a coach's dream. In the finals, the Spurs elevated their game to an even higher level. Almost 33% of the shots they took in that finals were from the 3-point line, They also made 472 more passes than the Miami Heat. They absolutely dominated Miami in the finals in almost every statistical category, including field goal percentage, three-point percentage, assists, rebounds, and free throws. The San Antonio Spurs' dominance that season earned them a reputation as one of the all-time great teams.
Chris Bosh described this as the Spurs as the best basketball team he's ever played against. How would you characterize what you ran into in the finals?
I would agree. They were a much better team, and that's how team basketball should be played. Selfless. Guys, move, cut, pass. If you got a shot, you take it, but it's all for the team, and it's never about the individual. And that's how team basketball should be played.
The real question is that 2014 San Antonio Spurs the best version of the Spurs to ever grace the court? And how do they match up against other all-time teams? Let us know what you think in the comments. And please subscribe. And thanks for watching Sports Pantheon.